Alright, mic check. Mic check. There we go. Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to Group 2 Racing here in LSR on this fine either Sunday afternoon or evening. Hope you all are doing well. Of course, had the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix earlier today, and now we'll have some LSR Group 2 Racing here around Singapore. As usual, happy to be hosting and commentating for you today. If you're was it new to LSR, vacant or vacant haddock, so just whichever you prefer. As you can see, a couple of cars coming out of the pit lane. I will refrain from spoiling what happened in the F1 race. Definitely caught bits and pieces, but it was certainly interesting, as we have our first couple of cars coming out of the pit lane to start their qualifying laps. Of course, got 31 laps around the Marina Bay Street Circuit today. Of course, this should be the last game where we'll see this circuit in this format, as we will be seeing a modified Sector 3 in the near future, so definitely going to be interesting to see that. Rick Strotting, I believe it was R. Strotting there, was it trying to spoil it? I think you'd have a better chance at saying Nico Rosberg won. But regardless, sitting on board with the Haas of Kevprod as he makes his way over the bridge. If you'll give me a minute, I do need to pull up corner numbers because I have no idea, and I know there's a lot of them that we got to worry about. But of course, got, I believe, 3 DRS zones, so it certainly should be interesting at least during qualifying. I'll also go and pull up that lap data. But should be very interesting. It's also the debut of changeable conditions here in Group 2. Of course, we will have a dry qualifying session, the first part of the race today is going to be wet conditions, so we won't know when exactly that changeover point is going to be, but it'll certainly be interesting to see how all the drivers decide to deal with those conditions. Of course, as we can see, Kevprod starting lap, of course, DRS wide open in that Haas, and you come into turns number 1, 2, and 3. Fairly quicker portion of the track, and then you come out, of course, into turn 4. You're going to want to keep it nice and tight, and then really use all the track to the left side there as you make your way into turn 5 and head into this first DRS zone. Of course, try to use all of the track possible without going all the way into that wall. Of course, you got the slight kink there of turn number 6 before the heavy braking zone down into turn 7, the 90-degree left-hander. Of course, you got turn 8 now, 90-degree right, of course, and then turn 10. So probably not going to see a lot of single-file racing through there, but also drivers going to be getting out right as far to that wall as they dare. Of course, then you got turn the old Singapore sling, which is now 11, 12, and 13, of course, as you come over to the bridge. Of course, this braking zone can be very, very tricky. Got to be very careful to not lock the brakes as you go through that left-handed hairpin. Got DRS zone number 2. Of course, not going to be reaching very quick top speeds through that section, but again, just important to really keep that car under control, and could be seeing a lot of overtakes specifically out of that section of the track. Of course, here's the section of the track which we'll be seeing for the final time in this game. Of course, coming under the bridge, so I'll be cut out. So from there's that little kink left-hander, so we'll just which we'll just skip at. The second Mercedes, of course, coming up to it now, that would just continue straight. Of course, Kevprod will be the first to set a lap time, and so the Haas will set at 138.7, and so everybody will be chasing that lap time. To Kevin Cal, I believe, just came to the line to start a lap, but it will be Tommy BR for Mercedes, just starting on the second Mercedes, who invalidated an earlier lap, as Tommy BR does set a lap. It's a 142.9, so a mistake earlier in the lap for the Mercedes. It'll be a Ferrari to the line next, I believe. So keeping an eye on that timing screen. The Ferrari does not pop a lap time. followed by a Williams and an Alfa Romeo, as Dodoligo is out of the race. We just saw sliding by that has lost the rear end. If we can try and go and see that Red Bull just went past. Let's see if we can jump on with KevProd to see the result of that wreck. And yeah, just you can see that Haas there just really lost it, and I think went into that left-hand side wall right before the bridge section. So likely not the last DNF that we'll see today. But of course, Tommy XXC, while we were talking, setting a fastest lap time of the qualifying session and on provisional pole with a 1:37.9. Zercity slots in second with a 1:30. Behind him, and it's Oreo Hafrican who will sit fifth. A couple other cars coming to the line right now. First will be Jim for Williams coming around those final corners. He'll go fifth fastest. One of the Aston Martins should be next to the line. That will be Formula Jonah who goes seventh, and Air Footballero right behind him goes third fastest with a 1:38.5. So that Speedy Gunner, who I believe just finished a lap, not setting a time at that point. Mercedes of Kevin Cal to the line to set a lap time. He'll only go eighth quickest, so one of the two leaders in the Drivers' and the Constructors' Championship, fighting fairly well. Of course, taking a quick look at the Drivers' standings, of course, here in Group 2. Bamboo Vegas, currently not with us, and I believe will not be joining us during this race, as Crooner sets a 1:37.7. But it is Crooner who normally drives for Alpine, who currently leads by 24 points over Kevin Cal in the Drivers' Championship, as we just about hit the midway point in our season, or we're projected to hit the midway point in the season as of next week. And of course, it is Kevin Cal in second, with James in third, followed by Alexis Beast, Viper Eyes, and your current pole sitter of Crooner. So it should be a very interesting race, but of course the Ferrari sitting on provisional pole, as I believe cars just kind of wheeling up to go on there, either on an in-lap or an out-lap. Acid Masters in the Red Bull. One of those cars on an out-lap, and the Red Bull will get underway here, so we'll have to keep an eye on Acid Masters time. But of course, taking a quick look at the constructor standings, and it's Mercedes on top. So the pairing of Kevin and Tommy running fairly strong. However, they are far from in the clear as T34 joins, so we will have a full grid of 20 cars here at the Singapore Grand Prix, as James 443 out of the session. I believe that was just on as he was starting the lap. So the Aston Martin just losing the back end from the look of things out of that final corner, and he will not be setting a lap in this qualifying session. So we'll jump on board with at first sector. Of course, Red Bull making his way to where we saw Dodoligo's Haas crash out earlier on in this qualifying session. So keeping it nice and under control. Of course, coming up to the bridge section now. Very important to get that car stopped as quickly as possible. And then, of course, going to be blasting out and really attacking under the power here. Of course, from here, it will be a much straighter shot all the way down to that last little chicane. Of course, this right-left will be cut out, as will the next left-right under the bridge here in next year's game. A couple of track changes that you can expect, including the removal of the final chicane at the Barcelona circuit. So it should be a couple of very interesting changes. Here comes Acid Masters to the line, loses the back end out of there, but manages to keep it under control. Is going to try and set a lap time, and after that spin, is going to sit in 13th. Here comes a Mercedes and a Ferrari, I believe, both on outlaps. So Tommy BR will sit 15th for the moment. We'll have to see if he can improve that time at all. Let's see, are there any... Air Footballero is early on his lap, so we'll have to keep an eye there. JD Bass with seemingly a mistake earlier. He was about 5 seconds down, and we'll dive into the pit lane now. Speedy Gunner as well. No front wing on that Red Bull, so he'll have to trundle back around and get that changed. Of course, he's got plenty of time to set another lap with 8:45 left in qualifying, as he is not able to get that car stopped with the damage to it, so he'll have to reverse and try and he will get back underway and get back going. But of course, Now, in the constructor standing, it's Mercedes leading by only 10 points from Alpine, so both teams going to be looking to pull away there. And Aston Martin sitting in third on 107 points. Of course, Mercedes currently leading with 131. So definitely going to be interesting to see how that battle pans out with Aston Martin only 24 points adrift. Of course, one Aston out of the race already, and Formula Jonah currently sitting in P8. Of course, we'll dive back on board with Air Footballero here, currently sitting in P4, but going to give way to a Mercedes who will go on board with instead. That is Tommy VR, down 4 seconds on his first lap time. Very much improving after a mistake on an earlier lap. Here he comes into the final 2 corners now, this double left-hander. Of course, up on the pit straight, where will Tommy BR go? He will go to the top. That's a 137.6, so he'll jump Crooner into provisional pole position. Where can Kevin Cal, his Mercedes teammate, go? Kevin Cal, only 10th fastest. So one Mercedes up at the front, the other currently in the last of what would be the point-scoring positions. Formula Jonah's Aston Martin, I believe, just starting laps. You can tell from the ERS there, just hitting 180 miles an hour on the pit straight. So we'll have to keep an eye on where Jonah slots in just about a minute and a half. Of course, a couple of cars coming to the end. JD Bass will dive into the pit lane. He's got a Ferrari behind him. I believe that is Crooner, so we'll jump to him. But he is just starting his lap. So again, Crooner going to be another driver whose lap time we'll have to keep an eye on. Of course, seems to be just starting a lap as well, so we'll keep an eye on him just in the same way we will for Formula Jonah. Of course, here comes KevProd in the Haas, going to be trying to jump up the order. Currently sitting P6, so very strong from the Haas car. Here he comes out of the final couple of corners. Can he improve on his lap time at all? He will. He'll jump up to 4th, pulling 3/10 on that first lap. I believe it'll be a Williams next to the line. That is some guy who'll jump up into P14. Next across the line will be a McLaren, who will not improve. Here comes Zersity in the Alfa Romeo. He will not improve. He'll stay P5. Let's see, one of the Alpines coming to the line, that was Tommy XXT, so I believe he is just starting a lap. But of course, jumping to Crooner, who is to a quarter of a second up, making his way through Sector 2. So we're certainly going to have to keep an eye on him, but we'll jump to Formula Jonah, who's a little bit later in his lap as Kevin Cal, jumps up into 7th from Mercedes, so potentially just put 2 laps together, and Jonah will dive into the pit lane there just to get a new set of tires as we approach 5.5 minutes left to go in this qualifying session. But of course, jumping back to the Ferrari of Crooner, up half a second now, so going to be almost certainly, if he can keep these last couple of corners clean, will pull that gap out from Tommy using all the track on the outside, on that right-hand side there. It really attacks that curb and to the line, and it's a 137.1, so he's almost half a second clear of Tommy BR now. So that's a very strong lap time from the Ferrari, as Jim is disqualified from the session for going the wrong way on track. So he sits 5th. But he'll drop down to last now after being disqualified. So a mistake there from the Williams means he will start last after parking up and going the wrong way. So a big mistake there from the Williams just pulls that lap time down off the board. So that'll be really disappointing for him. But he's shown good pace, so we'll have to see how that affects his race. African just came to line, he's up into 11th, so he picked up about half a second on his first lap time. But I believe that wasn't good enough to improve at all. Let's see if we can find anybody else on the lap. Tommy XXT, of course, sitting 3rd, diving into the pit lane. Zersity has invalidated his lap, so he'll probably dive into the pit lane right there. Kevin Cal as well. Fedora potentially just on an in lap. Doesn't seem to have that much fuel, but we'll at least stick on board with the AlphaTauri. See what he elects to do. Will he stay out and come to the line? He will not. He'll just dive into the pit. So we'll probably be seeing a couple of cars coming out to take their final shots at qualifying here shortly. As we can see, JD Bass giving way to, I believe that was Speedy Gunner. Of course, 3.5 minutes left to go in qualifying. If you've got any predictions for the race, again, should be drivers on track and taking the grid for the start of the race. Should be very, very interesting. Of course, got Hendricks on an outlap as well. Crooner, of course, diving into the pits. Erfa Bolero, meanwhile, is currently sits P6. He is up a tenth on his previous lap time, and that would put him in at least P4 if he can continue to gain time here as he goes into Sector 3. Of course, got left, right, another flick now into the bridge section of this Singapore circuit. You definitely need to be brave there and watch out for all of those barriers on the outside, and really using all that track to the left-hand side. So here comes the Ferrari. Can he join his teammate Crooner further up the grid through the final two corners into the line, and he will go second. So that's a Ferrari 1-2 as it stands, as Futbolero pulls a second on his first lap time. So that's a 1:37.629 for the Ferrari. So very strong showing from that pairing, as Tommy BR will just be starting his lap. So we'll keep an eye on the man who currently sits P3. He only needs about 200ths in order to jump back up into P2 and prevent a Ferrari front row lockout. So we'll have to see how his time can come down. I believe, let's see, there is JD Bass, who does seem to be pushing fairly hard as we cross the 2-minute mark to go in this qualifying session. Of course, this is round 7 of 15 as of right now. Of course, got for next weekend, round 8 here in Group 2. We will have our second sprint race of the season, this time in Silverstone. So definitely keep an eye on that, as Omega sets the time to sit 15th, and JD Bass will jump up to 8th after pulling about a second, or about half a second off his previous lap time. There's one of the Alpines. I believe that is Tommy XXC, if I'm not mistaken. It is. So Tommy will just be starting a lap as Jonah gives way to him, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But you know, got plenty of drivers out on track. Everybody still in the pit lane will not be improving on their lap times, and everybody will just be starting now. Of course, jumping on board with Tommy, he's up about just a little bit over half a tenth. The next week the week off. So next week is not an off week for us. The week after we are off. So, of course, Silverstone will be the midway point, and that will be our second sprint race of the season, so definitely stay tuned for that, and that's for all three groups as we have them ready to go. And Tommy BR cutting the final corner. He had about an eighth of a second there, but he cut the final corner, just really trying to attack that curb hard, and is going to be out of this qualifying session. So that is it for Tommy BR. He will start no better than third. Tommy XXC, meanwhile, he's 2/10 up early on in this lap. Of course, coming through the bridge section now, going to really try to open up this hairpin, going to get on the power nicely. So the Alpine, again, Alpine going to really be trying to chase after Mercedes as we reach the midway point, and that is 6/10 in hand for Tommy XXC, which will put him easily into second if he can keep it clean, and could put an Alpine on the front row, even in the absence of Bamboo Vegas, of course, who normally is one of the Alpine drivers. A little bit loose there from Tommy as the checkered flag has fallen for qualifying, and I think a little bit of a wall tap there for Tommy XXC, but he manages to keep that Alpine under control. He'll come to the line. Where will Tommy slot in? He will slot in P2 unless anybody can do anything about it. I believe it's Aston Martin of Formula Jonah. He will start in P9. It'll be Haas to the line next, trying to find him. That will be Kevron. He currently sits 5th. He will start 5th for this Singapore race. It'll be the Williams of some guy next to the line. He will not improve, so he will stay in P13. I believe it's T34, who is just starting a lap. His teammate Fedora jumps up into P5, so a very strong showing from the Alpha Tower. It'll be a Red Bull and a Mercedes to cross the line next. Acid Master is not improving on his time early in this lap. As he comes to the line, can he jump up the order? He will improve up into P6. The Mercedes behind him of Tommy BR, of course, will not improve. Kevin Cal will, of course, be next across the line. Crooner's on the lap. Can he improve even further? And he gets into the 136s. So an even further improvement from the Ferrari driver. Boosts his time. Can anybody else do anything about it? There's an Alpine to the line next. That is Kendricks. He'll currently start 12th. Kevin Powell jumps up into 6th, and AlphaTauri should be the last to cross the line. That's T34. He'll only start in 17th, and so there is your starting grid for this Singapore Grand Prix. Of course, not super competitive lap times from a couple of drivers, but of course mistakes probably from there. But it will be Crooner on pole for Ferrari, with being the only driver into the 136s, and it will be a Ferrari 1-3, but with Tommy XXC splitting the two, so it should be very, very interesting. Should be getting underway here in just a minute with Zercity going to the pit lanes, and of course there is your pole sitter of Crooner. Of course, here will be your starting grid, and it will be Crooner from Tommy Airfoot Bolero. I believe in his Group 2 debut, as I haven't seen him around a significant amount. Tommy BR, Fedora, Kevin Cal, Acid Masters, Kev Prod for Haas, Zercity, JD Bass, Formula Jonah, Kendricks, Oreo, Speedy Gunner, Some Guy, Omega, T34, Dodoligo, James, and Jim, who sadly did get disqualified after a mistake earlier on in that lap, is going to have him starting last. Of course, definitely keep an eye on a number of drivers throughout the order. James, of course, who currently sits 3rd in the drivers' standings. Kendricks, who's certainly shown pace at times, and numerous other drivers to come through the field, especially in what are going to be tricky conditions during the race here around Singapore. Of course, you got any predictions after seeing that qualifying session? Definitely throw them in chat. Of course, if you are new to LSR, we'll have a little bit of time before the race gets underway, so definitely take a second to go down into the video, drop a like on it if you would, as well as hitting subscribe to the LSR YouTube channel. If you haven't done so already, that would all be very, very much appreciated. I was definitely looking to continue to grow both the channel and the league. So if you're already subscribed, thank you. And if you're new, of course, as always, welcome to LSR. And if you're interested in joining LSR and being a part of some of these races in the future, definitely go ahead and throw that in chat. Of course, we'll be wrapping up with F122 and moving on to F123, hopefully before too much longer. But of course, if you want to join and get racing once we get into F1 2023, definitely be sure to do that, as we have 4 and 5 lights, and we are underway here in the wet of Singapore, and it seems to be a good start, at least tentatively, for Crooner. He will hold the lead in turn 1. His teammate's going to get swamped by a Red Bull and an AlphaTauri, though. And as the leaders get through, okay, that's a Ferrari spinning out, and that's a Ferrari in the wall, as well as a Mercedes. So that's Tommy BR and Airfoot Bolero into the wall early on in this race. And already we have a virtual safety car due to debris from that incident. It seemed that Alfa Romeo caught up in that as well. That was Omega and T34 who seemed to be caught up in that early incident as well. Of course, very tricky in that scramble down to turn 1. Speedy Gunner and JD Bass swapping places as well, so I believe just an accidental overtake under safety car there. But of course, early virtual safety car here around Singapore. Of course, again, very, very tricky conditions, but it is Crooner currently leading the way from Tommy. Got Fedora sitting 3rd, Zercity 4th, and Jonah in 5th. Of course, once we get underway a little bit more, we'll take a look at some of the updates there. 2 positions should be getting back underway before too much longer, as we're just waiting for the green flag conditions to get going again. Of course, all drivers on intermediate tires here around Singapore, as Tommy BR with a 3-second time penalty for corner cutting. So again, I think just really struggling with that lack of a front wing, even with everybody reducing their speed by 40%. Of course, as we do get back underway, everybody respecting that delta well enough, so we will just get back underway, as JD Bass with a mistake there early, potentially just getting on the power, as James will battle with JD Bass, they'll go side by side, and James will move up into P14. But of course, up at the front, that gap 0.7 of a second early, but those front 2 really trying to make a getaway here early, as everybody's seeming to just get it into a single file, as we do end lap 1. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the position changes there. Obviously, big losers, Tommy BR, Acid Masters, JD Bass, all the big losers, everybody from 16th down to 20th. Big losers is JD Bass as well, with a 5-second penalty for spinning in the pit lane. But of course, your big winners, Dota Ligo and Jim, both up 7 spots. Both Aston Martins getting 6th and 5th places, respectively. Xercity up 5 spots. As well as numerous other drivers, as those bottom 4 all going to dive into the pit lane to fix damage to their cars. But again, still plenty of racing left to go, as we do see Jonah taking a move on Xercity. They're going to go side by side. Can the Aston Martin get it done on the Alfa Romeo? He's going to look to the outside now, and the Alfa Romeo just going to cover him off. And as we can see from that helicopter shot, Jonah now going to have to be wary of Kevin Cal behind him, who gets a little switcheroo on him, and he'll move up into 5th position. So the Mercedes going to hold it now as they get into the old Singapore sling, and it'll be the Mercedes up into P5 and can go chasing after the other drivers. But of course, up at the front, it is still Ferrari from Alpine, as Crooner continues to hold that advantage on Tommy XXC, and that will be looking to make that grow. Of course, definitely keep an eye on those weather conditions as this race progresses, as we are projected to go into drier conditions later on in this race. But of course, already got a couple of packs here starting to form, one largely for 5th as Dota Ligo and some guy in Williams swap places. The Haas going to look to hold position on the outside, and that's a big lock up there from him, but he'll continue to hold the advantage over some guy. But they're both obviously going to be closer to being overtaken by Speedy. Some contact there, and the Haas is spun and piled, and there's a pile up there into the bridge section. So cars just getting really aggressive there here on lap number 3, and Speedy Gunner comes out, gets the worst of it. That Red Bull has no front wing, but it seems like just multiple lockups there. The Williams is going to dive into the pit lane, so he's got damage as well, as the AlphaTauri T34 going to go up the inside of Acid Masters, and Dota Ligo as well will take advantage. So some swapping there as Jim and Speedy both have to dive into the pit lane, and Dota Ligo down the inside of T34, and he's going to move up into 12th place. But of course, up at the front, it is still Crooner, currently increasing that gap just by a little bit each lap, up to about a second now. It's been at about 3/4 of a second at different points in this race. Of course, going to have to keep an eye on how that is going for them. But of course, got a couple of drivers swapping places. Of course, Jim and Speedy will be in that kind of battle towards the back of the order, as well as Kevin Cal making good time here on Xercity early on in this race. That Mercedes, of course, which got past Formula Jonah earlier in the lap, now is going to put Xercity under pressure. Of course, as Kevin Cal looks to extend his championship fight, both in the drivers and for Mercedes in the constructors. It's a little bit loose from a McLaren in the background. That was Oreo Hafrican, who's going to be under threat from Kendricks. He's going to defend to the inside. Will the Alpine have a run? No, not quite. So they'll hold it in 8th and 9th for the moment. His yellow flags. That is Speedy Gunner out of the race. Down at the end of Sector 1, potentially just outbraking himself. So the Red Bull out of the race. Down at, I believe that is turn number 7. So definitely disappointing there from the Red Bull. I don't know if we're going to get a safety car because of that. It doesn't seem that we will. It seems that Red Bull is in a good enough spot where we will not be having a safety car. As some guy and James now battling over the last point scoring position. As that Aston Martin may have a shot here at overtaking the Williams, as he's right on the gearbox of the Williams of some guy. Will James have a run here down into turn number 1? That Aston Martin continually closing, but of course no DRS to assist him means he'll currently sit in P11. Of course, we've seen a couple of incidents throughout the race so far. Those are all definitely going to go to the storage room, as James was able to overtake some guy just as we went away from him. So I believe that was on the exit of turn 3, but that's a nice move there from James to get up into the point-scoring positions. He's currently in 10th and can go charging after Kevin Cal. Continue to try and extend his championship fight. Of course, he started towards the back in P17, already up into P10 as Omega, now with a 3-second time penalty, I believe, due to track limits. Of course, gap at the front now up to 1.2 seconds. As we can see, that Alpine just staying in touch with the Ferrari. though not super close. If we do jump on board, we can see that although the conditions are still wet, the rain has stopped falling. Was it Speedy? I should be able to get it from here, but thank you, though. But the rain has stopped falling here at Singapore. So although the track is still wet, it does not appear to continue to be raining. So we'll definitely have to see how things continue here as we get early. And there's a big train of cars here behind Xercity. As the gap back to about P9 of Kendricks is all pretty tight. It's a big mistake there from Xercity. It's going to mean he loses a position to Kevin Cal. And will he now be under threat from Formula Jonah and other cars behind him? Or will he be able to take the fight back to Kevin Cal? So it seemed that it was a little bit of a tap on the outside wall and getting a little bit loose there from Xercity as Formula Jonah is round. So a little bit of dirty air there from the Aston Martin is meaning he's going to drop right down the order. He'll be in ninth. Of course, his teammate coming around the final corner now as well, but definitely a little bit lucky there from Jonah to keep it out of the wall. But a very close call there from Jonah. I mean, he's going to have to be very careful, of course, with his teammate now right behind him and everybody else up a position in tandem. Of course, now, as you can see, that Mercedes leading the way. Kendrick's going to try to have a run here on Oreo Hafrican. That Alpine closing up. He's going to go down the inside into turn number 5. He's got about a length and a half, and he is going to make that move stick. So that is Kendrick's up into P7 for Alpine. So very strong showing from him as the Aston Martins swap places at very much the same spot. So that's James in 9th and Jonah in 10th. Of course, up at the front, it is still Crooner, who's led from lap 1. And of course, 19 cars are still in this race, but it is Crooner now with a second and a half on Tommy XXC here on lap number 5. Of course, was it both drivers really just starting to pull away from Fedora? So that gap going to try, hopefully, continue to grow. Of course, it'll be very interesting to see who decides to make the first jump onto a dry compound of tire. Of course, still wet conditions here, but of course the rain has seemed to stop, at least from this broadcast camera. But definitely going to have to keep an eye on how some of this continues, especially this battle between Crooner and Tommy, as Tommy steals that fastest lap away from Crooner as we begin lap number 6. Of course, we got a nice battle for 5th forming as Kevin Cal was kind of pulled away from that group up at the front, and this is Xercity who will be defending from both Kevprod and Kendricks, who we saw just a lap ago make a very nice move on Oreo. Here comes the Alpine driver, going to be looking to continue his charge up the order. Of course, he was another one of those drivers out of position, and of course, driving for Alpine, who's going to be looking to increase that Constructors' Championship advantage. Of course, 0.3 is the gap. Now it's down to about a quarter of a second. He's going to have a run here on Kevprod. Is he going to take a look to the inside? No, he's going to think a little bit better of it and leave that move for a little bit. But he's going to be still really close. Again, a little bit of a peek to the inside there. As some guy dives into pit lane, and Oreo Hafrican just goes straight on there. So a mistake from the McLaren, and he just cannot get that car back on track. So, of course, very, very challenging at times to keep that car on track as he just goes into the runoff, and he's going to be under threat from Dodaligo, who's going to have the chance to make the overtake. He's going to put that hassle around the outside and move up into the last of the point-scoring positions, but that'll leave City, Kevprod, and Kendricks with one less car to worry about as they continue their battle. But up at the front, that gap certainly came down a little bit, so potentially a mistake there from Crooner. At some point in this lap, that gap was at about a second and a half as we started this lap. It's now down to about a second. So potentially a big mistake as the drivers continue to try to deal with these very, very tricky conditions here around the Singapore circuit. That gap now down to a second between the two leaders. As Tommy see with a 151.1. So that, again, these two drivers at the front just seem trading fastest laps back and front as Footballero and JD Bass swap places. Of course, got the battle between Xercity and Kevprod. Of course, they're going to be coming down on the pit straight a little bit loose there out of the exit for the Alfa Romeo. The Hack's going to be looking to the inside as they go down into turn 1. Is he going to make the move stick? He's going to have to cut the corner there in order to potentially stay out of the side pod of that Alfa Romeo, but he'll hold P6 for now as Hafrican and Dodoligo swap places, and Dodoligo will dive into the pit lane. So let's jump on board with the Haas. What will he elect to do now? As we take a look, and that was a weird look. That's some weird looking pit crews there from some of those teams. I wonder if that's, hopefully that's not a glitch that will affect anybody, but that is a front wing change for the Haas, who will be the first onto the medium compounded tire. Yellow flags. I believe that was for somebody potentially just screwing up the pit lane entry. We have cars diving into the pit lane en masse now, and we will see the first of the medium compound of tire. JD Bass going to be serving his time penalty, but Dodoligo will be the first driver out on track on the medium compound tire. So will this trigger a wave of drivers diving to the pit lane and trying to get ambitious on that medium set of tire on a drying Singapore circuit? Of course, the gap at the front sitting at 1.1 seconds. Of course, got Kevprod looking now once again, as Kevprod and Kendricks did swap places, so it's currently the Alpine ahead. But it'll be very interesting as the track's certainly significantly more dry than we saw just a few moments ago. As you can see, almost no spray coming off of those intermediate compound tires, and the leaders are diving into the pit lane. So we'll have to wait and see how much that effect will have on some of those midfield battles. Of course, Dodoligo is going to be really that one to watch as he makes his way around the circuit on those medium compound tires and really getting them up to temperature. Crooner has gone for the mediums, as has Tommy. Let's see. Fedora and Kevin dive into the pit lane behind them, so certainly this will mean that everybody dives into the pit lane, and yeah, and that is correct. Everybody diving into the pit lane. So let's see how close Dodoligo can pull up to the pack. We got Kevin Cal on the hards. So he will jump up into third, actually. So he got a jump on Fedora, who I believe served a penalty. Kendricks has gone for the soft tires. He's jumped up into fourth. Kevprod's in fifth. Fedora, look at that train of cars. James is in this fight. Jonah, of course, after having to double stack there, is going to lose a fair amount of time. Zersity still on intermediates. Zersity apparently didn't change the selected tire, so that'll be a big loss for him, as DRS has now been enabled, and now everything's going to really start kicking off. Dodoligo able to overtake Oreo Hafrican as he just comes out of the pit lane, so he's up into P10. Definitely a number of positions swapped there, but it is Crooner currently leading the way from Tommy XXC. But now Crooner will have to contend with DRS, but that gap at 1.1 seconds. So Crooner getting a really good exit as well in these drier conditions and able to get the advantage there, as Tommy XXC with a weird little bug it looked there. Not sure whether that was just a mistake or what, but he has left the session. Tommy XXC has disconnected, so we'll certainly try to get him back in quickly. If you'll give me a second, but hopefully we can get the Alpine driver back after disconnected there. If you'll just give me a second, I will re-invite him. Hopefully we can get him back in before the end of this race. Again, just give me a few seconds, and then we'll, of course, jump right back to the action here. There we go. So hopefully Tommy XXC can come back, because he was showing that he was very strong early on, so hopefully he can get back into this race. But, of course, James now on the back of Fedora in the AlphaTauri, so I think that Aston Martin really showing a lot of pace early on during this stint, but this will work to Crooner's advantage very heavily, as James actually diving to the pit lane. So does he have damage on that Aston Martin? He certainly does now, and that's James out of the race. He spun on pit lane entry and is now completely blocking the track. That's got to be a safety car, I'd assume. And it seems that safety car is not going to come out, which is very surprising, as that Aston Martin completely blocking the pit lane, but the driver currently sits third in the driver's standings, out of this race with a mistake on pit lane entry, and that's a big mistake. Of course, we were able to get Tommy XXC back, so hopefully he can take control of that Alpine back before losing too much time, as Aston Masters set the new fastest lap of the race. Of course, that's going to be something to keep an eye on, as Zersity as well go over into the pit lane to change his set of tires. As we do have Tommy XXC back, as you can see, that Alpine, of course, not ghosted anymore, but Kendricks right on the back of Kevin Cal. Of course, the Alpine going to be much quicker on that soft compound of tire. He's going to have DRS. here out of the bridge section. Is he going to look to make a move? That gap at about 0.3, but he's going to hold station for the moment. Further behind, Kevprod and Fedora battling as well. About a 1/10.5, so 0.3 now. So definitely have to keep an eye on that. But Kevprod as well, one of the drivers going for that hard compounded tire. So potentially just looking at a one stop from Wario, Kevprod, and Kevin Cal. Of course, as we come onto the pit straight, that gap at about half a second between the Mercedes and the Alpine. Of course, Alpine showing very, very strong today, even in the absence of the lead driver, Bamboo Vegas. But of course, Kendrick's going to be looking to take that fight as yellow flag in Sector 3. That is a spun Alpha Tauri. That's Fedora in a similar way to how we saw Joda make a mistake earlier on. And Joda Ligo does almost the same pirouette there in the background. So 2 mistakes from drivers there coming out of those final couple of corners. But again, just kind of lucky to keep it under control. Meanwhile, Tommy BR down the inside of Oreo African, who went a little bit wide in that final corner. He's going to pinch him pretty much all the way out to the wall, and it will be Tommy BR up into that final point scoring position as Acid Masters with the new fastest lap of the session. But yellow flag in Sector 1, that's for a spun Haas. So Total Ego, I think, just potentially really struggling with tire temperatures. Of course, going to have to be very careful with tire pressures because, especially in a changeable conditions race, of course, trying to see if we can see any sort of tire temps there. And it does seem that those rear tires, as you can see on that steering wheel, up at 225 degrees, which is very, very toasty. So Dodolio probably going to be struggling to keep that under control. It's T34. 5 seconds for crossing the pit lane exit. So big mistake there as Crooner coming up to the back of Omega now. As you can see those blue lights flashing. Of course, we do have ghosting turned on, just especially with it being an online game, as Tommy XC with a new fastest lap of the session. As you can see Omega getting out of the way for Crooner there. Of course, Kevin Cal still defending from Kendrick, so even on those soft compound tires, which may be just wearing away rather quickly now, Kendrick's just not able to keep it under control, though that gap down to about 3 or 4/10 as it stands. Of course, you have Footballero now, who's going to have to defend from Tommy BR, who's shown very, very good pace for Mercedes. As we come here through the final couple of corners, that gap currently sitting at just about a second, so Tommy will have DRS, the advantage of DRS here on this lap. But of course, that gap not coming down a whole lot, so we'll have to keep an eye on how that continues. Of course, rear lights flashing on cars all over the place. Of course, Tommy XXC with a quick disconnect, so that caused that gap to Crooner to continue to increase. But of course, only one virtual safety car so far during this race, and that was for a bit of a chain reaction incident on lap 1, just down into turn 1 that led to a lot of debris out on track. And of course, we lost Speedy Gunner on lap 3, and James just a couple of laps ago, but of course here on lap number 11 currently. As you can see, our current leader making his way out of the final couple of corners to start lap 12. Of course, Crooner has led since lap 1, so it's been a strong showing from the Ferrari driver, who has shown very good pace, and I believe he's a multiple-time pole sitter this season, but has just had some very, very unlucky incidents resulting in not really being in works now. Keep trying a couple of things and see if I can hear myself. Alright, check. Okay, so that'll... Okay, so I can hear... Okay, let's see. Hopefully it works when I plug this back in. Okay, and it does. So there we go. We are back. So again, sorry about that. Brief bit of technical difficulties on my end. Just wires and cords not working quite as well as I would have hoped. But Formula Jonah with a mistake as Omega is out of the race. That's a crash from the Alfa Romeo. So let's go ahead to the battle here. There's the Alfa Romeo up ahead. And I'm surprised that we haven't seen a safety car because that car's in a very dangerous position. And still the safety car will not come out for that crash as Tommy BR is able to overtake Airfoot Bolero as of this point, just before that bridge section. So the Mercedes finally able to get through on the Ferrari, who defended fairly heavily there for those couple laps. But very good to see that fight continue to go on. Of course, taking a look back up at the gap at the front, it is still Crooner by 6 seconds over Tommy XXC behind him. So again, just very strong and consistent from the Ferrari, and he's just going to have to look to really try and keep that going here around the streets of Singapore, as there is our third DNF and departure of the session, as Omega is out of this race here on lap number 14. So the Alfa Romeo driver out of the Singapore Grand Prix. Yellow flag again. That's the other spun Ferrari. That's Airfoot Bolero, and I believe that's the 4th or 5th time we've seen a spin out of the final corner. Of course, there's really only one or maybe two lines you can take through that corner in order to keep that car under control. Otherwise, the rear wing just steps out from beneath you. But Football Air are going to be looking to recover. Currently will be sitting P11 as it stands. A little bit loose there still for the Ferrari on the exit there of, I believe that's turn number 5. As they run down into turn number 7. So starting to keep an eye on Football Arrow to be making a recovery job. Again, that is a Williams of some guy with a spin there at turn number 3. But able to keep that Williams going in the right direction. Of course, a lot of the field spreading out now as we approach the halfway point. Xercity is able to overtake some guy there. I believe that's with the assistance of DRS after the Williams making an earlier mistake. But it will be Crooner leading as we hit about the halfway point. It should be that halfway point very, very closely. It's a good chance to take a look at some of the position changes throughout the race. Of course, Kevin Cal up 3 positions from his starting spot. Kendrick's definitely one of the big winners early on in this session. Of course, 8 laps up on from where he started this race. Kevin as well up 3 from the joint up 4. Dodoligo, definitely a big winner as he's grabbed 9 positions, as well as Jim up 7 positions, even sitting P13 after being disqualified from qualifying after a spin and just trying to recover the car. Left him starting in last. A couple of big losers. One of them, Airfoot Bolero, who we just saw receive that time penalty. Of course, he's down 8 positions. JD Bass as well with a bit of struggles there for McLaren. He currently sits 7 places adrift of his starting spot, but of course currently sitting on those hard tires and potentially just looking to go to the end. So the McLaren driver just going to be looking to keep it solid, keep it consistent. Xercity as well started P9 down to P14. Again, still plenty of time for plenty of things to happen, whether that's a full-on safety car, whether that's more incidents. Hopefully all our drivers can make to the line. But of course, that may be a challenge if some guy does dive into the pit lane. But certainly going to be interesting to see how all of our drivers continue to deal with the changes of the rest of the race. And, of course, taking a look at some of the stops, Aspen Master's already 2 stops, Nairfield Bolero already 2 stops, but everybody at least made one to switch off of those intermediate compound tires. Of course, Hendrick's really falling off the back of Kevin Cal now, so we're going to be likely to see that Alpine dive into the pit lane before much longer and get off that soft compound of tire. Yellow flag in Sector 2. I believe that's a very slow Ferrari. I believe it was either a slow Ferrari or a slow Alfa Romeo. I believe it was the Ferrari, though. So I believe that was... actually, no, I believe that was the Alpha Tauri of T34 being lapped by Kruner. So Kruner with now an 8-second gap. So again, just going to be he'll be looking to just kind of be in race management mode now. Of course, 8 laps on those medium compound of tire. Can probably go a couple of more laps still. But of course, it'll be very interesting to see how tire wear continues to kick in. As for Bolero does dive into the pit lane for Ferrari, so we'll see. That could be potentially to repair damage on that machine. Of course, he'll switch onto a fresh set of medium compound tires to come back out. That'll certainly be interesting to continue to keep an eye on. So he'll come out very close to Zercity there. As yellow flag, that is Jim out of the race. That is a mistake on the exit of turn 3, and there is our first safety car of the race, and this may screw over Kruner. As you can see, that safety car out ahead of him, so could Kruner. This is quite possibly the worst thing that could happen, because look at Tommy XC behind him, able to get a free pit stop now, as Kruner is going to pull up to the back of the safety car. So Kruner, being massively unlucky, as that mistake there with the spin of Jim bring out the Mercedes safety car is going to change the dynamics of this race. You can see as well, Tommy as well able to serve a 5-second penalty. Kevin going to dive into the pit lane. But of course, Tommy can see a massive winner from the safety cars. You can see all the drivers diving into the pit lane to get onto fresh sets of tires. But this is a godsend for Tommy, who of course got very unlucky with the disconnect he had earlier, but is now right back in this race. There's Kevprod there, going to be switching that front wing. Kendricks as well, going to be a big winner. He gets a practically free stop, as well as everybody pretty much diving into the pit lane to get fresh sets of tires. Of course, the only exception is Kruner, who was just past the pit lane entry when this safety car came out. So he'll almost certainly be one of the biggest losers from this incident. Of course, that gap right now at about 30 seconds as Tommy XXC is going to be stuck behind T34 and some other drivers as JD Bass disqualified for ignoring yellow flags. JD Bass is out as he received numerous penalties there. I don't know what that was for, but JD Bass disqualified, though it seemed to... I don't know whether he attempted to overtake the safety car or what happened there, but JD Bass disqualified from the session now for ignoring yellow flags. And of course, Kruner wants that safety car to get going as that gap to Tommy XXC is going to continue to come down. But of course, he's going to have nowhere to go, and he's going to certainly lose a position to Tommy. Will he lose any more positions, though? As you can see him getting ready to dive out from behind that safety car. And there he goes, diving into the pit lane now. So where will Kruner come out as Airfoot Bolero 5 seconds for crossing the pit lane exit? So that's the second time we've seen that penalty pop. Of course, there's Kruner coming out now. He'll at least be second. Kevin Cal, of course, coming out of the final couple of corners. As well as some guy is able to unlap himself. This should be T34, so I believe that should be all of our drivers on the lead lap. T34, I think, just needs to go and get the safety cars. Kruner as well, losing position to Kevin Cal. So the Ferrari, who has led this race from the start, is going to sit P3. T34 will be able to unlap himself. So that will be everybody on the lead lap, which is good to see that everybody has been able to do that. So certainly a good thing there. But it will be Tommy XXC who will lead the way once we get back underway. Of course, Kevin Cal, a big winner there. He moves up a position as well. Kendricks is going to be one to watch, currently sitting P4. But it will be an interesting run to the finish. Of course, everybody going to be looking to make their way back around the grid. Of course, if you're watching while we got the chance under safety car, if you could drop a like on the video, that would be very much appreciated. Definitely going to be looking to continue to grow the channel as well. And if you're interested in potentially seeing yourself in any of these streams in the future with some commentary over it, definitely go ahead and let that be known in the live chat here on the video, or in the comment section down below if you're watching this afterwards, as we'd love to get you set up with a link to the Discord channel so that way you can sign up for races in any of our groups in the future, as we'd love to see you on track, whether it's in F1 22 or later on in F1 2023 when that game gets released. Of course, it's going to have one more lap here under safety car, as everybody going to be on the lead lap. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see how many drivers are going to be stacked up behind the safety car as we get back underway, as I don't think we'll have enough time for everybody to get pulled back up to the safety car, but it'll certainly be interesting to see. Of course, we got from about first down to about 8th pulled up to the back of the safety car now. It'll be interesting to see whether we get back underway on lap 19 or lap number 20, as we can see Tommy pulling up to the back. Of course, Acid Masters about 40-odd seconds back. I think that Red Bull might have damages the McLaren of Oreo African spins in the background. It doesn't seem that Acid Masters has any damage, but potentially just with that Red Bull seemingly either just saving fuel or doing some number of things. You can see that number almost a lap down on fuel is Acid Masters. So really just struggling to try and pull that time back. But of course, 44 seconds as of right now. But yeah, the Red Bull really going to have to get some fuel during this safety car period. Taking a look at all the drivers, Tommy XXC is good on fuel. Kevin Cow is to the good, as is Crooner. Kendricks is just about 0.3 of a lap down on fuel, so he should be okay. But that Alpine certainly in a good spot on weight. But it seems that almost all of our drivers are to the good on fuel, at least by a little bit. Of course, with that one exception being Acid Masters, who's really holding up both Dodoligo and Oreo African, who both want him to really get a move on, as he continues to go rather slowly here. Of course, it's going to be seeming like an 8-way fight as of right now. We'll have to see as we cross that end timing marker for Sector 2 if we're going to get back underway immediately, or if we're going to have one more lap under safety car. So we'll have to see, and it will be safety car in this lap, so it will be these 8 drivers here who are going to be looking to get it going. So that means Acid Masters is going to be very much in trouble now. Of course, he's got about half a lap to the good, but he's going to be really pushing now, as you can see that gap really coming down, that Red Bull really getting underway. So keep an eye on Tommy, Acid Masters, and Dodoligo pulling up to this pack as we get ready to get underway, as that gap really coming down all the time. But all eyes going to be on Tommy XXC as we get ready to get back underway. Of course, coming up to the bridge now. Of course, no overtaking until, I believe, between the safety car lines, which would be the pit lane entry and pit lane exit. But of course, Acid Masters is going to pull up to the back of the grid now. So the field's going to be nice and bunched up, and we'll have at least 10 drivers all nice and bunched up. Of course, we'll jump on board as we get ready to get back underway here with Tommy XXC. It'll be very interesting to see when he chooses to go, as he does have control now, and he will get underway immediately, as here we go, back to green flag conditions here in Singapore, and it's a good jump from Tommy XXC, but Kevin Cow still right with him, and we're going to look to break the toe immediately, as already a spin from Kevprod in the Haas. He made a mistake there out of the final corner, so yellow flag in Sector 3, and he's dropping right down the order. But it seems that everybody holding position on turn 1, Tommy BR, I believe with a similar mistake. He's in the wall, so that's a Mercedes dropping down the orders in a similar way that we saw on lap 1 of this race, and there's no front wing on that Mercedes. So horror for Tommy BR, as his teammate is up fighting for a potential race victory, but it is still Tommy XXC leading the way here on lap number 20 as we go into turn number 7, and as the Alpine continuing to hold the advantage by about 7/10, by about 3/4 of a second now on everybody behind him. of course, your leader for a number of laps, who got very unlucky from the timing of that safety car of Crooner. Showed a lot of pace in that Ferrari, but of course he has to overtake two cars if he wants a shot at winning this race. Though Kevin Cal having a penalty could really complicate Kevin's chances to win. So certainly going to have three or more drivers in to win it at the end of this race. Formula Jonah as well up into fifth. So the Aston Martin going to be looking to score decent points today, as that gap already up to 1 second up at the front. So Tommy X6E really seemingly able to get those medium compound tires fired up and into the window he wants them, and is already pulling a gap from Kevin Cal. But of course we're keeping an eye here on Crooner, who led from lap 1 until I believe lap 17 when that safety car came out, but of course got caught behind it he just passed the pit lane entry when the safety car came out. 4/10. Of course, no DRS until the end of next lap. So he'll be all over the back of Kevin Cal as Tommy X6E with the fastest lap of the race with a 1:41.6. So he'll currently net that. Fucked up again. Also, apologies for that. Kind of a. Okay, well, yeah, apologies. Hopefully the commentary is back now. Hopefully the commentary is back now, but of course it cut out again. Apologies, that is a mistake there, a little bit wide from Tommy, as some guy and T34 both dive into the pits. Hopefully it works now. Cutting out, but hopefully this will be better. Again, just checking real quick. Okay, yeah, so hopefully this should work out. Of course, I won't have audio at this point, but again, should hopefully prevent any further issues, but shouldn't be too bad. Of course, yeah, I apologize, just having issues with the cord connecting to my microphone, but I'll just kind of leave it unplugged from this point on. But of course, the gap staying at about 2.5 seconds now between Tommy XXC and Crooner. Of course, sitting about equal ERS, and both drivers to the good on fuel. I believe the only driver who would be worried at all would be Aston Masters, and you can see on that dashboard, on that steering wheel, he's about a half a lap under fuel as it stands. So the Red Bull going to have to conserve fuel late on in this race, but of course he's coming up right to the back of this battle between Kendricks and Kevin Cal as they make their way through Sector 2, and the Alpine looking very, very fighty now. He's going to take a peek to the inside, and as they come around the corner, it will be still the Mercedes ahead, as Kendricks, I believe, just thinking better of making a move there. But of course, he's going to have a chance with DRS off of the bridge. And of course, here we go, but that Mercedes seemingly just getting really, really strong exits there out of that corner. And of course, Kendricks now going to be under threat from Acid Master, so he'll have to be careful as he continues. But of course, the gap at the front, 2.3 seconds, as Crooner continues to try to hunt down Tommy XXC. And of course, Crooner leading for the lion's share of this race before we had a safety car just 7 laps ago. That ended up with Crooner just being really unlucky as the safety car got called right there exactly for Crooner. And has led him now to be the chaser as opposed to the chased. Of course, we'll have at least a three-way battle here for third in these closing stages. Of course, going to jump here with Kevin Cal. Of course, you can see that Alpine right behind as DRS now going to be open for the Alpine driver, so definitely going to be interesting to see how that continues. Of course, you can see him in the background closing a little bit, but not quite enough, as Kevin Cal just seemingly content to hold it. As Oreo African out of the race, that was a spin for the McLaren. Will that result in a safety car? That will. So now that's going to be, once again, so that will be our second safety car of the race. And so what will our drivers elect to do now? Because that'll bring at least KevProd, some guy, and T34 all into the fight, with only about 3 or 4 laps to go. So will everybody dive into the pit lane to slap on some soft tires, or will they elect instead to take the track position advantage? So I think the big driver to watch here is going to be Tommy XXC, as it'll be interesting to see what all of the teams elect to do. As you can see, all of the crew teams out of the pit lane from that view from the Williams. So certainly we'll have at least 1 or 2 drivers pitting, as we are down to 13 drivers remaining in this race. But with Oreo African just having that spin, we now have another wrench thrown into the strategy, and Tommy XXC will not dive into the pit lane. He'll stay out. Crooner will dive into the pit lane. So let's see what all the cars behind him do. Kevin Cal stays out. Kendricks comes in. Acid Masters comes in. Dodoligo stays out. Formula Jonah will pit. Fedora is a bit further behind. We'll have to see what he elects to do. He will stay out Xerxes will come in. So numerous different strategies coming from our teams here today. But it will be Tommy XXE, Kevin Cal, and Dota Leo all taking the track position, as will Fedora, who's going to come out just ahead of Crooner. But, it'll be Crooner, Kendricks, Acid Masters, Jonah, Xerxes, Kevprod, and probably T34, all electing to go for soft compound tires, as well as some guy who's going to be looking to make a charge back around and get back into the train. But, Acid Masters won't have to worry about fuel anymore, and we're going to have, probably be... a mad dash to the finish here in Singapore. So certainly stay tuned because, anything could happen as of this point. But it will be Tommy XC leading the way. Could Crooner for Ferrari potentially take that lead back on a fresh set of soft compound tires? Could Kendricks, Acid Masters, or Jonah potentially, take advantage? Or could Kevin Caldolio or Fedora take advantage of that track position in order to take that race? And I know this is sounding like the ending of an episode of Dragon Ball Z, but I almost can't help myself as of right now, because it'll certainly be very, very interesting to see how our drivers deal with this complication here at the end of the race. As JD Bass as well out of the session, of course, unlucky to get disqualified there. I believe, again, just tried to overtake, tried to unlap himself under the first of our safety cars, which potentially caused that issue to arise. Because we got JD Bass out, we lost to Speedy Gunner early on in the race, so we're under intermediate conditions, as well as James, Omega, Jim, Tommy, Footballero, and Oreo Hafrigan just one lap ago. But of course, it's on lap number 26. So should have one more lap under safety car to allow T34 to try and pull up T34 and some guy, as well as Xerxes and Jonah, to pull up to the back of the pack, but definitely stay tuned. I am going to actually step away for just a second, if you'll give me just one moment. Of course, definitely stay tuned to LSR later today. We will have Group 3 racing, I believe, just following this. So definitely stay tuned and hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, so that way you get pinged whenever we do go live for Group 3 action later on tonight. Should be another great showing in a similar way to how Group 2 has been today. Of course, you see drivers trying to keep temperature in those tires. Of course, definitely important to take a look at the penalty chart. T34 and Xerxes, of course, with 6 and 3 seconds of time penalties. Going to be ones to watch, as those will likely, those could take away their chances of scoring points. But up at the front, Kevin Cal and Dodoligo, both with 3 seconds of time penalties. So they're going to be looking to build as much of a gap as they possibly can here in these closing stages. Of course, we got 10 cars all in the train now, and that gap between T34 and Kevprod likely to come down quickly now that Kev is behind the safety car. But of course, T34 and some guy going to be looking to really are going to have to use a lot of those soft compound tires in order to catch up. So it'll be interesting to see if we potentially get any more complications or yellow flags, as I believe we will have one more lap under the safety car. So it will be a 3-lap shootout at the end of this Singapore Grand Prix. So definitely, again, just take the advantage now if you haven't done so already. Definitely go down and hit the like button down below and subscribe. Again, if you haven't done that already either. Again, just would be very much appreciated. Of course, just got to scroll down and hit that. Of course, thank you to everybody who has liked the video already, as you all are amazing, as well as any new subscribers that have dropped by right now. It's great to have you. Look forward to you staying around and enjoying more LSR League racing in the future. Of course, again, this is round number 7 of 15 as it stands right now. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. Of course, next weekend is our second sprint race of the season at Silverstone. So definitely looking forward to that for all 3 of our groups. Of course, a number of close battles throughout the pack and all the fields that we have running. And if you're looking to join, definitely go ahead and let me know in the live chat here, and we'll be happy to get you set up with an invite link to the Discord. I believe most of our rigs are full for full-time drivers, so for drivers who have a seat reserved for them every week. But of course, every once in a while, somebody's not going to be able to make it, so don't let that stop you from letting us know that you are interested in running in LSR in the future, as we can definitely rate, because we tend to have a number of reserves who regularly race in any of our groups, just for any full-time because due to any full-time drivers not being available. So definitely don't let that stop you. As well as we have groups we have varying groups depending on pace, as well as a number of things. So definitely don't hesitate to get involved. We also love to have more commentators and stewards. So potentially, if that's something you're a little bit more interested, definitely would love to have you as a part of the LSR team. Especially as we look to grow into F1 2023. Of course, should be looking to get back underway shortly. Safety car should be in this lap. So here we go. Tommy XXC as the safety car comes up to the line, and it will be safety car in this lap. So it'd be interesting to see how these four cars that lead the way try and deal with these worn medium compound tires. There's a mistake there from KevProd, I believe. Is Xerxity going to have to position back? He will not. Yeah, he will not. So that has down into P10. Of course, we'll jump on board with the Alpine. Of course, waited through the chicanes to get back underway last time round. Of course, going to just sit on board. So will he go at the same point, or will he go a little bit earlier? Will he go a little bit later? That's certainly going to be an important question as we start lap number 29. Of course, the safety car coming into the pit lane now. So Tommy XXC now has full control of the field, and we'll be getting back under green flag conditions right now as Tommy XXC getting underway, and we are back underway racing, and that's a good jump on Kevin Cal as that gap up to 6/10 and growing. So a good jump there from Tommy ahead of the cars behind him. A little bit of contact there between Crooner and Kendricks. Kendricks sending it down the inside. Contact, and Crooner is round. Kendricks sent it into turn one and caused carnage. And Crooner, the leader for the majority of this race, now down into P12. Terrible incident there for the man who led the race from the start, as the Ferrari now finds himself in P12. But of course, did have Kendricks just getting, I think, a little bit too risky there up the inside, trying to make a move on both Fedora and on Crooner, and that just led to a bit of a chain reaction there. But it is Tommy XXC now leading the way, and is going to be looking to go away. I don't know if that's potentially true, as it looked like that Crooner potentially was a little bit boxed in. I think there was a little bit of side-to-side contact, but I think in the entrance into turn one, I think that was a little bit more on Kendricks. Of course, that will come down to stewards potentially reviewing that incident after the race, and we'll certainly leave it up to them as to who deserves more fault. But it is Tommy XXC currently leading the way. Acid Master's potentially the best shot of the soft compound runners, as you can see him there, right on the back of Fedora. So it's the Red Bull versus the AlphaTauri. The Red Bull going to take a peek to the inside there, but not quite going to have the move, as the gap between Kevin and Tommy is up to 1.2 seconds, and Dodoligo goes round, and there's chaos there. I believe that was just mistakes from Fedora and potentially from Dodoligo, but that's a big mistake there, so that puts Kendricks up into P3. Acid Masters will be chasing after him after trying to avoid that incident. Formula Jonah now up into 5th. You can see the AlphaTauri in the background potentially trying to make a move on Xerxity, but nothing quite there as Tommy XXC was to use a 3-second time penalty. So now it's a full-on race at the front between Tommy and Kevin, who are now on the same set of penalties. That's a half of Dodoligo round, so that's for that yellow flag in Sector 1, as we have now 2 laps to go. Was it Kendricks now coming down the pit straight? Of course, he'll have Acid Masters chasing after him, but they'll be trying to both chase after Kevin Cal and Tommy XXC, as neither car there has time penalty, as with Kendricks, Acid Masters, and Jonah all without time penalties, so they're going to be really trying to take everything in their power to pull that gap down to those cars at the front. But it will be Tommy XXC continuing to hold that advantage. He'll need 4 seconds, he'll need at least 3 seconds rather, on Kendricks in order to win this race. That gap currently sits at 4 seconds, so I think it's definitely worth to switch over to that leader gap as it stands. But we'll have to keep an eye on those gaps at the front. Of course, Kevin Cal with gap growing there, and the gap from Tommy XXC back to Kendricks is growing as well. But is Tommy comfortably now at that 2.6 second mark? Kendricks 4.4 seconds back, and he'll continue to chase. Crooner still in the points there in P10, but of course with an incident there, that seemed that there was, of course, something that's going down to the stewards. But of course, now we will be starting the final lap. DRS, of course, will be enabled for this final lap, so will that impact the showing at all? But it is Tommy XXC now by 3 seconds from Kevin Cal. Kendricks, of course, pulling up to the back. That's a 1.3 second gap between Kendricks and Kevin Cal. But of course, coming through the first couple of corners, it is Tommy XXC who continues to pull away from Kevin. So there's so much pace in that Alpine that even in the absence of Bamboo Vegas, we may still see an Alpine winning this race. Of course, Haas of Dodoligo with a spin there in those final couple of corners. Crooner and some guy going to be battling here in the closing stages. But currently, it is Tommy XXC still with the advantage. Hendricks, that gap at 4.8 seconds now, so about 1.2 seconds back. So Kevin Cal, so Acid Masters potentially finishing on the podium. He's going to look to continue to push now. Yellow flag in Sector 1, again, just for a half there, as Crooner able to overtake some guy. But of course, we're coming through the bridge now on that gap at the front at 3.8 seconds. So Tommy XXC still holding comfortably at the front. Of course, ran second for most of this race, qualified second, and then just with great timing under the safety car now, able to just take advantage of a very, very unlucky incident for Crooner. And of course, as we come through through Sector 3 now, coming through the bridge for what will probably be the final time here in LSRs, we'll just be driving past it later on in the session. He's just got a couple of corners left to go, and it will now be Tommy XXC. Of course, 2 corners left to go. We see numerous spins here, but he's just got to keep it under control for a little while longer, and it will be Tommy XXC winning the Singapore Grand Prix for Alpine. That gap to Kevin is big enough that he will retain that win. Kendricks will finish P2 after penalties, and Acid Masters P3, so an Alpine 1-2 means a great showing for them in the constructor standings. It will be Kevin in 4th, with Jonah in 5th. Zersity will end up finishing 6th, with Kevprod 7th, T-Third for 8th. Crooner, who led this race for a long portion of it, will end up finishing P9. Some guy will round out the points in P10. Fedora just outside of the points for AlphaTauri, and Dodoligo in 12th. But of course, congratulations to Tommy XXC, Kendricks, and Acid Masters, at least for the wins on track. Of course, definitely going to be interesting to see how some of the stewards treat any potential incidents. But of course, thank you for joining, of course. Been great, as always, to have you here. Again, just congratulations to Tommy XXC on that win for Alpine. Of course, your driver of the day, despite, of course, Acid Masters, who with a very, very great showing and a great recovery drive. But certainly interested to see who your driver of the day is, as we see Tommy coming through the tunnel here to take the podium and the victory. Of course, you can see the gritty there, but Alpine 1-2 with a Ferrari in P3. Of course, congratulations to all those drivers. You can see the British driver lifting that trophy. But of course, congratulations to all our drivers on a very, very interesting race. Definitely interesting to see that. Of course, see the champagne and the celebration there. Of course, taking a look at the final order, it is Tommy XXC from Kendricks and Acid Masters as your top 3. Of course, Acid Masters also netting driver of the day. Kevin Cal finishes 4th for Mercedes, with Jonah in 5th for Aston Martin. Zersity finishes 6th for Alfa Romeo, followed by Kevprod and the Haas. T34 then finishes 8th for AlphaTauri, and Crooner finishes P9 and also nets that fastest lap, so he'll walk away with 3 points at the end of this race. Some guy then finishes 10th for Williams, with Fedora in 11th for AlphaTauri. Dodoligo then finishes in 12th, the Swede for Haas. And then, of course, your DNS are Oreo, African, Football Arrow, Tommy, JD Bass, Jim, Omega, James, and Speedy Goddard. Of course, thank you as always for joining. Again, just very tight on the scheduling here, so sadly will not be able to have time for podium interviews, so certainly would be interested in getting that set up later in the week, so potentially keep an eye on further uploads. Again, just sadly don't have the time to get that done today, but of course congratulations to Tommy XXC on that win. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll be seeing you all next week in Silverstone. But of course, stay tuned for Silverstone later on today, and hope to see you later. Again, thank you very much, as always, for joining. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you later.